Hi guys. So today's video is going to be a review and a spoiler chat for Black Prism by Brent Weeks. I'm actually going to do this book review and chat a little differently. I'm going to do the non-spoiler part first. That's normal, I usually do that. And then the spoilery part at the end. But in the middle, I'm going to address something that I have heard a lot of people say, or people will ask, or people will mention about this series, and that's the fact that people have heard it's sexist. Things that I'm going to point out are not to say it is or isn't. They're passages that have maybe some potential to be off-putting to people. That said, getting into the non-spoiler review, this book, the plot, the characters, the character arcs, so much of the book is rooted in its magic system. The magic system is definitely extremely unique, and it's very complex, it's very complicated, there's so many details to it, which I think is really cool for people that really like to know all the rules and limitations. There's so many details to it, but to give you a general gist of the way the magic system works is that it's very heavily based on colors. There are 7 colors in the color spectrum, and people have the ability to draft from certain colors. Some people have the ability to draft from 1, some people from 2, some people from 3, and then there is one individual that is able to draft from all the colors, and this person is known as the Prism. This is for sure going to be something that a lot of very big fantasy fans are going to be really into, I think, because magic systems are one of, I think, the main elements of fantasy books that so many people really love, and this magic system is so unique, and it infiltrates pretty much every realm of their world. However, if you are just getting into fantasy, this probably isn't the best book to pick up. It reads very easy. I'll get into the writing style in a sec, but it's so dense when it comes to the magic, and there's so much to the magic that if you're kind of new to fantasy, or maybe you're just not that into the magic systems, you might not love that element of this book. The writing itself is not dense at all. The writing is very easy to get into, but there is an element of the writing that I found interesting. It wasn't bad by any means, but I've never seen it done before. This particular thing is that this book is written in third person, but occasionally you get character thoughts, and when you get character thoughts, generally in fantasy books, character thoughts are italicized, kind of an indication of, oh, now we're getting in the person's head. And if they're not italicized, at the very least, there's some kind of he wondered or he thought afterwards, and in this book there isn't. Like I said, not a negative thing at all. It just surprised me because I've never seen that done before, but something that I think that kind of bled into was that portion of the writing I found to be almost casual, because the characters' thoughts aren't necessarily very grand. They're not very epically thinking people. They don't speak in like fantasy talk necessarily. They kind of talk like normal people, so it felt somewhat casual in that sense. But then we'd have pretty long paragraphs at times of descriptions of things, or sometimes we get long paragraphs that are kind of going into the history of something. To me, it was an interesting juxtaposition between the casualness of the way we sometimes were in the characters' heads, and all of a sudden we get sometimes a formal background of a building or a city or something of that sort. And that's not to say that you can't go into characters' heads and also have great world building. That's not what I'm saying at all. It's just that sometimes the world building didn't feel like we were getting it through the characters' eyes, which I would have expected, given that we so easily slipped into their heads at times. As for the plot of the book, like many big fantasy books, it's hard to pinpoint. It's a multiple point of view story. There's a lot going on, and a lot of the inspirations and motivations of the characters are heavily influenced by things that happened in the past. A few main takeaways is that the Prism character that has the ability to draft from all the colors, he is one of the main characters. He is definitely probably the most complex character. This character supposedly has a son that he had with a woman during the war while he was betrothed to someone else, and so it's kind of a little bit of a controversy, but he goes to find the son. The son is one of the other perspectives. He's a 15-year-old, and he, I don't know if he's very likable to very many people. I will say though, maybe for some people, these characters are extremely lovable, but it came across to me that these characters were intentionally flawed and at times quite unlikable. So if you're the kind of person that likes flawed, unlikable characters, you will probably really enjoy this. But if you're the kind of person that's like, I want at least one person to really root for, that's a little tough in this one. I actually think that's kind of the perfect transition going into whether this book might be sexist to some people or not, because of the fact that these characters aren't the most likable. One of those slightly unlikable traits is maybe how they speak about women. A plot point in the book where this woman is being pushed towards an individual who has a lot of power. Her family really wants her to be engaged to this individual so that they can have some political gain out of it. And she is thinking that she won't have to do anything with this person until she is married. But this individual, this guy, makes an offhanded remark to her father about how he's going to be up all night doing things with her. And the father, because he really thinks that they need this political marriage for the family, doesn't stop him. The guy takes her, he carries her to his room. She is crying, she is in pain, but he does things with her anyway. And then when he's done, he sends her away. Later, despite the fact this terrible thing happened, this woman ends up loving this man. That is a very, very serious example. Some other examples that are maybe more tossed off type examples would be, in one instance, there is a woman who is in a room of political figures, and one of the only physical descriptions we get of this woman has to do with her chest. Chests in general are a bit of a hot topic in this book. The humor often is kind of based around that kind of stuff. We also get a lot of awkward instances of somebody accidentally kind of falling into a woman's chest, or like accidentally touching or looking at a woman's chest. There's also a character who has a great deal of power, and this particular character has a room slave, which is a woman that does everything for him. She's his servant, and she also is available if he's feeling frisky. This particular male character, while the woman is actually kind of very respectful to him, one flaw of hers is that even though she's great at everything, she never just loses herself in the moment, which I found to be something that might be annoying to somebody, because like, you know, oh, so your sex slave basically isn't seeming super eager. What a bummer. Women's appearances just in general also seem to be a very big factor in this book, regardless of whether it's a man or a woman's perspective we're getting. And one example of this would be this particular character, who's actually probably one of the coolest characters in the book, is reunited with his daughter. The daughter is 17, her mother died a long time ago, and when her father and her are reunited, the father tells her that she's perhaps even a smidge more beautiful than her mother, a claim that he'd not have tolerated until that day, seeing the truth with his own eyes, and that her mother would be proud of her. So to sum up, her mother would be proud of her for being hotter than her. The reaction of the daughter is that she goes, "Father," and then her cheeks color, looking pleased. Another example with a grown woman who is known for being an awesome warrior. She's known for being very lethal and deadly, and this particular character at one point is being spoken to by somebody who's kind of a tool, and this person tells her that she used to be better looking in her body when her shoulders didn't look like a man's, and she thinks to herself, darn, I've always been so self-conscious about my shoulders, and at least once a week I think that very thought. Beyond just women's physical appearances, women in general, or tasks that are generally assigned to women in this world, are often spoken of or looked down upon. So for instance, at one point a character starts crying, and that character is a boy, and then this person's like kind of trying to comfort him, and he's like, oh, it's like having to deal with a woman, isn't it? At another point in the book, a woman is shown something that is very intense, and so she sits, and it says that she does this lest she suffer a very ladylike fainting spell. The last example I'll give was one that was in the narration. A particular character, he has cut off his hair, and he is trying to weave the hair together for a specific purpose that I won't mention, and it says in a somewhat derogatory way that now this character is resigned to women's work. With all those examples given, I want to reiterate 2 points, which is one, that just because some of those might have come across negatively to you doesn't mean, you know, like Brent Weeks is a terrible person, and as an author's characters and the actions of an author's characters are not the actions of the author. And then second is that out of context, without being able to spoil things and give all the details, you know, things might read different if you're actually reading the book. So again, the point of all that, the point of me addressing it was because I know a lot of people are curious. I know a lot of you have asked, and I wanted to give that information. I wanted people who aren't comfortable with those kinds of things to know beforehand, and I wanted people who were just curious and maybe are like, oh, that's not what I was expecting, that doesn't sound that bad, it sounds like it's just the characters or the world, now you know. Now jumping into the spoilery portion of the video. First, I want to talk about Kip, because truly, I think I have never disliked a character more. I couldn't stand Kip. He was hypocritical, he was rash, he was unintelligent, and I don't mean unintelligent like he just doesn't have the capacity for intelligence. I mean, he made stupid decisions, he had stupid actions, he said stupid things all the time, and he never learned. The first time that he is with Gavin, Gavin hits him for being disrespectful, and then when he still doesn't get it, he makes him pass out, and he tells him, maybe keep your mouth shut when the person you're speaking to has the ability to wreck you, especially given that you're pretty incapable yourself, and probably not a very good idea to piss off all these other strong individuals. And he's like, oh, okay, and he's just so infatuated with Gavin, and then doesn't listen to that information at all. And for all his griping about how he hates himself for being fat and he feels like it's mean because other people, he just can tell other people look down at him for being fat. He's like always going off about that kind of stuff. He does the same exact thing when at one point in the book he meets one person fatter than him, and this person tells him like, well, you could afford to not eat a little bit, and he's like, the audacity of this person who's even fatter than me to say this to me, what a whale. Also, Kip's a little perv. I get when you're a teenager, you're hormonal. I am not a boy. I don't know what it was like to be a 15-year-old boy. I know that you start noticing things and thinking things. Like, I get that element. It doesn't even bother me if in Kip's perspective, he's like noticing how attractive women are and it's like, or whatever. That's fine. But when he's talking to Liv at one point and he's struggling to tell her that he cares about her, and he's thinking to himself like, what do I tell her? What, that I love her, that I love when she wears that one green sweater that's just too tight. That's not love, man. That's just you really wanting to bang. On top of all of that, he's also a huge hypocrite, because right before that, he was upset because Liv looked like she wanted to tell him something, and then she ended up just saying like, I just am glad you're here. And then he thinks like, oh, thanks for like actually being honest with me. Ugh, like he's all upset and annoyed at her because she kept something to herself. But then he's a blubbering mess all the time, and it's not like he ever gets anything decent out, and it doesn't matter because there's not really anything decent going on up here anyway. The most likable character in the whole book, and kind of a character that I wish the entire book was about, is Iron Fist. That guy was awesome. That guy was a boss. He was probably the only character like I really liked. I liked Corvin, but I didn't like that comment I mentioned earlier where he tells his daughter that his dead wife would be proud of her for being hotter than her. Like, that was a weird comment. But aside from that comment, I felt like Corvin was also really cool. With Gavin, I didn't really find Gavin to be that likable, but I found him interesting. There were moments where I felt like maybe I was gonna like Gavin, but then I would remember, you're keeping your brother locked up indefinitely, and you're doing this because you're too weak to just end his life. I mean, he thinks to himself, I should kill him, I should put him out of his misery, but I just can't bring myself to kill my brother. I mean, I remember this one time he carried me and it was really nice. Don't get me wrong, his brother was a terrible person, but I mean, that's a pretty messed up thing to do, and Gavin's not like the kind of person that's like, I'm gonna make him pay. Instead, it's that like I don't want to do this to him, but I also just am indecisive. Speaking of Gavin and the whole switching places with his brother, okay, I found this really amusing. So Gavin thinks to himself, or he's telling Corvin that he feels like part of the reason that he could never tell Karis the truth was because she's seen them both naked. So if anybody would be able to differentiate them, it was her. Sorry to burst anybody's bubble that thinks that we like have photographic memories and we can like remember all the details of the down there parts, but if she hasn't figured it out by looking at your face, I don't think she's gonna figure it out by looking at your stuff. Anyway, to keep myself from going off for way too long, I'm gonna cut the review and chat off now. Thank you so much to all of you who buddy read this as well. It was so fun to get to see your guys' perspectives. As always, happy reading to all of you. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.